Hey, ever had a headache so bad you thought, man,
When I want to explain it, my head will be headache me. Yeah.
well, lucky for you, modern medicine has all sorts of nifty drugs for that. But back in the day, people had a different approach called trephination, also known as carve hole in head and hope for the best. So grab your flint tools, maybe a towel to bite on, and let's crack open the history books, or in this case, the cranium. It's 1865 and we're in the ancient Inca city of Cuzco. A guy named Ephraim George Squire, who's basically a renaissance man of exploration, gets a gift from Senora Zantino, Peru's top collector of all things ancient. It's a skull, but not just any skull. This one got a half-inch square hole cut out of it. Looks like someone is trying to make a new window for their Neuralink. Squire thinks this skull has undergone a procedure called trepanation or trephination. It's the same thing. Fast forward to a meeting with the New York Academy of Medicine. The crowd's like, no way! How could anyone survive a trephining operation carried out by Peruvian Indians? Racism in the olden days aside, back then the very best hospital at the time had a survival rate for trephining that was less than 10%. That's because infections were like a free-for-all at the time. In short, no one believed him, so he brought his scholarly friend to Europe and presented to Paul Broca, the French dude who was known for this area of the brain. Say it with me now. The Broca area. That region of the brain contains neurons involved in what I'm doing now. The ability to speech. My Broca area. The ability to speak and communicate through spoken language. Broca examines the skull, consults with his colleague, and determines that this hole was made on purpose, and the person lived for a while after it. So in 1876, he reported this to the Anthropological Society of Paris. But even in Paris, people are skeptical. They are not ready to believe that ancient Peruvians had this down to a science. Racism in the olden days aside, 7 years later, archaeologists found more skulls in central France from the Neolithic era with neat roundish holes. They had wavy edges as if it's been scraped with sharp stones and discs of skulls of the same size as the hole. Some discs were even found to have been worn as an amulet, suggesting people were walking around with holes in their head for years before they died. Thankfully, there was no racism in trephining, as trephine skulls were found of both genders and all ages. There are a few ways they used to do trephination. The first is a rectangular intersecting cut. The tool for this job is given an adorable name, Tumi. Tumi looks like a shovel or a pickaxe, usually made of obsidian, flint, or any other material that Tumi can bash your cranium into a rectangular piece. The second method is scraping, usually with a flint or glass. Our boy Broker here demonstrated that he could reproduce these openings, but it took him 50 minutes, including the period of rest due to fatigue. So either they had amazing anesthetics or the guy was scraping at Mark 1 speed. The patient has to sit and endure this intense head rubbing for, let's be generous, 10 minutes. The third and fourth method are quite similar. It's circular grooving. A hole is cut and the disc is lifted out. The fifth method is making a bunch of small holes with hand drill and then connecting them with a chisel. So why did so many people drill holes in their head? For Hippocrates and his followers, it was to let out bad blood and relieve pressure. The idea was that stagnant blood in the skull was as bad as stagnant water. So the reason for trephining, or at least one reason, was to allow blood to flow out before it spoiled. There's also a story from ancient China about a famous doctor with a name sounding like a kung fu kick. Dr. Hua Tuo. He was summoned to the palace of Cao Cao, the commander of Han forces, who had an unbearable headache. After examination, Hua Tuo concluded that there was trapped air and fluids in the commander's skull. So, general anesthesia will be applied, followed by opening of the skull with a cleaver and removal of the excess material. Cao Cao, with his common sense, thinks that this is an absolute joke and angrily ordered the kung fu doctor wannabe to be imprisoned. From the Renaissance until the 19th century, trephination was popular for treating head wounds, fractures, and even epilepsy. The procedure was so dangerous that the surgeon doing the operation probably had one as well. Today, trephination isn't just a relic of the ancient medicine. Neurosurgeons still use it, but it's more about diagnosing problems, relieving pressure, or dealing with injuries. In Africa, traditional medicine practitioners still perform trephination, primarily to treat headaches from head injuries, and in our modern tech-savvy world, trephination has even found its way onto the internet. Some folks advocate for DIY trephination. Anything with the word DIY in front of it is a horrible idea. But anyway, so there you have it folks, the journey of trephination from ancient rituals to modern medicine. It's a procedure that's been around for millennia, proving that even in the darkest corners of history, people were willing to drill a hole in their head waited for a chance of a little relief. Heck, this showed how resilient the human body could be. Not even a half-inch hole in the skull could take us down. Not after a few years, at least.